Hello, I'm Aaron.
I'm Anna.
I'm Jaye, and today we're going to be talking to you about a biome called the Temperate Deciduous Forest and how energy flows through that biome. So, like I said, we're going to define a biome and determine which one we live in. We will talk about a temperate deciduous forest, food chains, and food webs. And then at the end of our presentation, we will connect what we have learned to a local wetland that you can go visit in person. So, what is a biome? A biome is a large section of Earth that is defined by climate, soil, animal life, and plant life. I will explain climate in a few minutes, so just keep that in the back of your minds. Soil in a biome is just dirt. I'm sure all of you have gone outside and played in the dirt or mud at some point, so think of that when we talk about soil. Animal life and plant life in a biome are the specific animals and plants that live in that area. As you all know, certain animals live in some places and do not live in others, and plant life is exactly the same. So what biome do we live in? This is a video clip that will briefly explain the temperate deciduous forest, which is the biome that we live in here in East Tennessee.
Welcome to Moo Math and Science. In this video, I'd like to talk about the deciduous forest can be found in the eastern half of North America, middle of Europe, eastern China, southeastern Australia, Asia, and Japan. Deciduous forests have very fertile soil. As a result, you will find broadleaf trees such as oaks, maples, and beeches, pine trees, perennial herbs, and mosses. You will also find a large variety of organisms, such as spiders, turtles, salamanders, birds, cardinals, woodpeckers, black bear, deer, and even foxes. The climate of the deciduous forest is most famous for the 4 seasons. Welcome to Moo Math and Science.
So as you look at this map, you will notice the areas that are shaded green. These are areas where temperate deciduous forests are located on Earth. The reason that biomes are located where they are is due to the amount of sunlight that an area gets. As you all know, the Earth is a sphere. This means that sunlight will not reach some locations as well as it reaches others. The areas closer to the sun, like the equator, receive more energy than the areas further from the sun, like the North and South poles. The amount of energy in an area is what causes the location of biomes. Climate is the weather in an area that occurs over a period of time. 2 important things in climate are temperature and precipitation, which means rain or snow. In the temperate deciduous forest, the climate is temperate, which means it never gets too extremely hot or too extremely cold. Although there are seasons, the changes are moderate. The average yearly temperature is 50 degrees Fahrenheit, and the average yearly rainfall is 30 to 60 inches. The temperate deciduous forest has 4 seasons, which are winter, spring, summer, and fall. During winter, which is picture number 1, there can be snow on the ground and there are no leaves on the trees due to the cold, dry climate. In the spring, which is picture number 2, plants begin to grow as temperatures start to rise. In summer, which is picture number 3, the temperature is the highest it will be in this biome. Most of you love summer because of summer break and going swimming at the pool. Lastly, during the fall, which is picture number 4, the leaves begin to change colors and fall off the trees due to the changing climate. This video shows a maple leaf changing from a green color to an orange color during fall.
So now that Jay has taught us what climate, temperature, and a biome and the biome we live in is, we can now talk about the plant life and animal life that is in the temperate deciduous forest. So when you think about plants and animals within a biome, they all have a different role, and so we can name them based on that role. Do any of you know what a producer or consumer is? Plants are known as producers. They're called producers because they produce their own food. They can make their food through photosynthesis, which is a process where they use things like water, sunlight, and carbon dioxide to make their own food. Animals are known as consumers. They consume things, so they can only eat other things to live and get energy. They cannot make their own food like plants can. So you can label animals by what they eat. There are 3 different types. An herbivore is an animal that only eats plants. A carnivore is an animal that only eats meat, and an omnivore eats both plants and meat. So if you look at the different plants in a temperate deciduous forest, here are some of the main ones you might see. The yellow buckeye is a big tree. Bermuda grass is a grass. The gilder rose is a rose, and the rhododendron is another shrub present in the forest. What's cool about rhododendrons is you might even see them in your yard. People use them all the time for landscape. You might even see Bermuda grass in your yard, and it is that grass that turns brown in the winter and green when it warms up again. Some animals that are in the temperate deciduous forest include a white-tailed deer, which is a herbivore, meaning it eats plants, an American woodcock carnivore, so it eats meat, an American jackal, which is also known as a coyote, and it's what you hear howling at night. It's an omnivore, so it eats both plants and animals, and then you have a raccoon, which is an omnivore. So the temperate deciduous forest, the plants in it sit at different layers within the forest. The highest part of the forest is called the canopy, and it's the tallest part of the forest, and it protects the other layers of the forest from bad weather and harsh sunlight. It contains tall trees, and smaller plants can even grow on top of these trees. The middle layer is known as the understory. It is between the other 2 layers, and it has shrubs and smaller trees. The forest floor contains things like dead animals and plants, soil, which Jay talked about, and little plants that do not need a lot of sunlight. Due to the changes in climate and temperature, which Jay taught us about, plants and animals have to have adaptations. An adaptation is a feature that helps a plant or animal survive in any environment. The plants in the deciduous forest lose their leaves in the winter to face the cold environment. So when winter is coming, the plants cut off the water supply to their leaves, and this is why they fall off and change colors, like the video you saw. Other plants just die back during the winter and regrow in the spring. Plants here can also adapt during these colder weather by having big leaves, so they're able to spread out and absorb as much sunlight as possible to warm themselves. Some animal adaptations include short ears and tails, and some animals even have a thick coat of fur to protect themselves from the cold. Some animals can either choose to hibernate during the winter or migrate, which means they leave the area and return when it warms back up. Hibernation is when an animal is going to take like a big long nap during the winter, but before they do this, they have to stock up on food. So they eat a bunch and then they go sleep for a while until it warms back up and they can come back outside. Other animals can just store food during the other seasons and use it during the winter, so they don't have to hibernate or migrate. Now we're going to do an interactive read aloud on EPIC. Life in the trees and leaves. Squirrels, skunks, and raccoons live among the trees. Rabbits hide and chipmunks gather seeds. Jays, woodpeckers, and hawks live and hunt in the forest. Many animals have coloring that blend in with the ground. The colors help them hide. So this is also an adaptation. Foxes, bobcats, and mountain lions hunt deer and small animals. Bears eat berries and fish, but will eat anything else they can find. Future of deciduous forest. As you know, I'm sure you've been in the deciduous forest hiking, camping, or fishing. But people cut down trees here in the forest and they clear the land to farm. This can be bad because it takes away plants and animals' homes. It also can pollute the air, and mining and fires change the forest for a long time. As you can see, there are a couple different ways we can help to protect the forest. So now you can go home and be a scientist and watch a leaf lose its water. So what you're going to want to do is pick a green leaf, lay it on a plate, and look at it each day. What happens to it? As you observe it, the leaf is going to lose all its water like the trees do in the winter. As the water leaves it, the leaf is going to turn brown and die. So now that we know what a temperate deciduous forest is and what the different animals and plants are like, we can now see how the energy moves throughout this biome. We look at food webs and food chains to study this.
This is a short link to a Brain Pop video that describes food chains and food webs. Food chains and food webs. Food chains show the transfer of energy from one living thing to the next. Everything starts with the sun. The sun provides energy for plants to produce their own food. Energy then flows from the plant to the next item in the chain. Food webs show how living things work together to get their energy. Levels of the food chain and food web. There are two different categories that we group these organisms into. Producers. Producers are the base of the food chain, as Lexi stated. They obtain energy from the sun and make food for themselves using photosynthesis. Consumers is the second category. They obtain energy from eating other organisms. Two examples of producers that we have in the temperate deciduous forest are American beech and the lady fern. These are two producers that are green plants, and they make their own food by getting energy from the sun. Consumers. There are three different levels of consumers. Consumers obtain energy from eating other animals. The first consumer is the primary, and they're mainly herbivores. They only eat plants to get their energy. An example would be the gray squirrel. The secondary consumer is mainly omnivores that eat both plants and animals. An example of this is the wood frog. A tertiary consumer are mainly carnivores, and they only eat animals to get their energy, such as a black bear. Here is an example of a food chain. Food chains are important because they show the direct flow of energy from the sun to the producer to the next organism, only in a single arrow, instead of showing the energy transfer from multi-organisms. Multi-organism energy transfer is described in food webs. Here we see producers and the primary, secondary, and tertiary consumers that we have just talked about. Here it shows the energy level as they flow from one organism to the next, but they interact with one another. Here we have a link to a game that interacts with students, as you are, to learn how food webs and food chains are in the environment. You must produce producers and consumers in order for organisms to live. And over here we have a worksheet for you to make your own food chain and food web. Finally, the Tennessee Wildlife Viewing Area. Here is a close to home temperate deciduous area that you can go and visit. It is called Mossy Creek Wildlife Viewing Area. It is a wetland that is a temperate deciduous forest. It is open year round, and you can go and see it and show what you've learned from today's class to your parents. There's been over 113 bird species found in the Mossy Creek Wildlife Viewing Area.
So to wrap up our presentation, if we remember, a biome is defined by climate, soil, plant life, and animal life. We live in a temperate deciduous forest where the climate is not extreme, which means it's not too hot and not too cold.
A temperate deciduous forest has 4 seasons, as we discussed, and this is why plants and animals have different adaptations. Food chains and food webs show the flow of energy throughout the biomes.
Food chains contain producers and different level of consumers. Mossy Creek is a local part of the temperate deciduous forest that is a wetland that is fun and easy to visit to apply what students have learned today.
We hope you've enjoyed what you've learned today, and we hope you go tell all your friends and your family what you've learned.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Bye.